Packers fans, stay up to date on all of your Packers news this season via our newsletter. You can sign up for the PackersNews.com and more Journal Sentinel newsletters by clicking on the link in the brief field of this video.
Hello, Packers fans, and welcome into the Green 19 podcast from JS Online and PackersNews.com. I'm Kassidy Hill, joined as always by Ryan Wood and Tom Silverstein here in our offices in Lambeau Field, where, guys, things are starting to feel a little tense because we are 48 hours away from the big cut down day. Spoon, I know you've been through a couple of these now.
I'm not tense.
You're not tense.
I'm not tense.
You can do this in the locker room. Maybe the things. It didn't feel that much today, but there were not a ton of guys in there. Packers did practice on Sunday. They will practice again Monday. LaFleur just kind of wants to see the guys one last time before they start making these cuts. But there was a cut this morning, Sunday morning. Linebacker Ty Summers, he was the first of what will end up being 27, so they have 26 to go. Does that sound about? Is my math right? I'm in journalism, not math. I don't need to know numbers. Ty Summers was the first cut. Let's just start there. Was that a surprise? Was that sort of expected? And do you expect many more surprises over the next day or two here?
It wasn't a surprise. He went from being a core special teams player last year to, in practice, he never cracked the first team. And so there was no way, I don't think his play at inside linebacker was going to carry him to a roster spot. His play on special teams would, but he never was able to crack the starters. And so I really kind of thought that this was going to happen. He played his butt off against Kansas City. He tried, but they're just going with, I don't know what caliber of player they're going with, but they're trying to go with a higher caliber of player. I don't think he was responsible for how poorly they played against Kansas City.
I think it can be significant without it being a surprise. And it is significant because each of the last 3 years he's been a core guy on special teams. He's finished top 4 in reps on special teams each of the past 3 seasons. He led the team as a rookie in 2019 in special teams reps. But he really got caught up in the midst of a transition in both phases, both his defensive position and special teams. On special teams, Rich Bisaccia has been bringing his guys in, the guys that played for him in Las Vegas for the past couple seasons. So they've been transitioning to Bisaccia guys there. And then inside linebacker, he was a casualty of the increased depth. I mean, I'm not sure any position on the roster has seen, maybe defensive line, but even defensive line has seen its depth increase from last season to this season more than inside linebacker. And as Matt LaFleur said today, when you invest a first-round pick in that room, it changes things. And so they obviously have the All-Pro coming back in Devondre Campbell. They've got Quay Walker, who's going to be a starter. Chris Barnes has been a starter, now is number 3. And Isaiah McDuffie has had a really good camp for himself. So he really fell off the top 2 lines of the depth chart there. When you do that in both phases, that's what happens.
Is he also a casualty, like you said, Bisaccia brought some of his guys in, of Dallin Levitt being here and being able to sort of lead the special? Y'all know Ty Summers better than I did, have covered him longer. So was that sort of the role he filled, was what is now that Dallin Levitt role?
Ty Summers was probably the number 3 inside linebacker last year. Oren Burks got some work there, but no, I think it's a completely separate situation. I think Dallin Levitt is here to mostly play special teams, but he's also played the slot and he can play safety, and he's probably a better position player than Ty Summers by a little bit. I think the thing that's really noticeable to me is their top special teams guys the last couple of years, Summers, Burks, Randy Ramsey, they're all gone. So they're going, like Ron said, with Bisaccia's guys. Dallin Levitt's going to be on the team. Keyshawn Nixon is going to be on the team, and he's going to play special teams. I don't know if Rico Gafford's going to make it, but he's another guy who played under Bisaccia. It's a whole new group, and why they're struggling so badly is kind of a mystery to me. Fundamentals is supposed to be his strength, and LaFleur said there were guys who really weren't playing that hard, so that was kind of interesting to me.
I'm glad you brought that up, because let's discuss it a little bit, because a lot of these bubble guys will come down to what they do on special teams, so it is relevant. As LaFleur said, we got it taken to us pretty good by Kansas City on special teams Thursday night. They did. I mean, Kansas City out-returned them, out-gained them. I think the only place that the Packers really had the edge was at punter, and Kansas City still has a pretty dang good punter, but, Pat O'Donnell kind of did all he could, but his coverage was not there. And LaFleur said when they were watching the tape the next day, it was just, he was almost like flabbergasted. He essentially said they were freelancing, and I'm putting a few words in his mouth, but essentially said the guys were just kind of doing their own thing and not showing any effort, which is something that you can control. That was something we heard about special teams last season and the season before that. Guys doing their own thing, not doing what they were coached, not showing any effort. And so will that be fixed somewhat, quote unquote, when there's more consistency there? Because they did play a lot of guys on special teams. They rotated a lot through. And maybe having some of the starters there, which has been something that LaFleur has mentioned wanting to do, to play more starters. And, those starters weren't playing in the preseason games, right?
I thought the thing that stood out most about what Matt LaFleur said was that he played a lot of guys on the team's units to give them the best vetting process ahead of final cuts. So they were giving it a hard look. Now, with that said, some of the things that just happened shouldn't happen no matter what. These are all professional football players, so you've got to be better there. And I think that what we are seeing is that this is not going to be an overnight fix. When you have a teams unit, when you inherit a teams unit that was so bad, as bad as it was last year, I mean, could not be worse. I mean, it was as bad as it can get at this professional level. You don't just get good overnight. It's a process. And I think that you're seeing a process. I think it should be, and Matt LaFleur said it should be better than what it is right now. And he'd be lying if he said that he was real thrilled with where it's at. But with that said, it's going to be a process.
Spoon, like we said, a lot of these bubble guys is going to come down to what they can do on special teams. A couple of those bubble guys, let's look at offense. We've debated back and forth on how many wide receivers they might end up keeping. Some of the guys towards the bottom of that unit, Juwan Winfrey, Samori Toure, has one of them edged out the other, so to speak? I mean, we've seen Samori sort of step up during the preseason, but Juwan Winfrey's been here. He knows this offense a little better.
Yeah, Toure did exactly what a rookie needs to do when he's either not played that well or not gotten a lot of opportunities, which was the case with him. Amari Rogers the same, although Amari Rogers was going to make the team. But Toure did exactly what you need to do to make a 53-man roster, which is have a big game in the last game. They gave him the opportunities, and he came through.
He led all the receivers.
Yeah, 6 catches, 83 yards, should have had a touchdown, was very close. Now, that doesn't guarantee him a roster spot. Bottom line there is that they have to decide between Juwan Winfrey as a special teams player who's a gunner. He plays on punt return. He plays on kickoff return. So if they really like him, then they'll keep Winfrey over Toure. Now, will they lose Toure? I don't know. I don't know how much one game will sway people, but he definitely made a statement.
I thought it was interesting what Matt LaFleur said in his first press conference after coming back from Kansas City. He was laying out how he and Brian Gutekunst can think in different timelines sometimes, because as a head coach, you're thinking about today. You got to win today. You worry about tomorrow, but today is today. And the GM...
You sound like Scarlett O'Hara.
I'm giving my best Matt LaFleur coach speak here. Win-win for the Gipper. But for the GM, it's the broad view. It's the 30,000 foot looking into the future. Who's going to develop? Who's got a better ceiling? Where's the potential? And keeping the talent over the long course as well as today. And I think that Amari Toure and Juwan Winfrey really personify that, because who's more ready today? Well, especially you listen to the quarterback here, right? You would think it's Juwan Winfrey, especially special teams. He's done that a lot more at this level. And when the quarterback has your trust, that's a good place to be in. But over the long term, we've seen Amari Toure really flash potential. His speed, his 4.4 speed, there's something developed there that might be more than Juwan Winfrey. And so that's going to be the decision that has to be made. At the end of the day, it's Brian Gutekunst's decision. So that's interesting.
You know what? I mean, I would bet that they could cut both of them and get them both back. I wouldn't be surprised if they did that. I think people, particularly us, overestimate what other teams are going to do. And someone was giving me some stats on that the other night about how many people actually get claimed after the cuts. And it's incredibly small amount of people who get claimed off of waivers, because everybody has their own people and they've trained them, and you better just be really convinced. I mean, Amari Toure was a 7th round pick for a reason. He wasn't. All these teams had 250 whatever opportunities to draft him. So I think they could conceivably cut both of them and then put them on the practice squad and then decide what to do after that.
I think it's more likely that they cut both of them than keep both of them. They're not keeping 8 receivers.
No.
6 is much more likely than 8.
Right. And the thing is, then you can also make any kind of move if someone's hurt. You can put them on IR after the 53 and then call them up. I just think that we shouldn't take for granted that one or the other is going to make it.
I had Amari Toure on the projected 53 as the 7th receiver. But what I just said about Amari Toure, a guy that isn't quite ready to help now, but has something to develop and some potential there down the road, that's practice squad. That's what a practice squad player is.
Don't forget Allen Lazard was cut.
He was.
Nobody picked him up, and he's going to be their number 1 receiver this year. So there you go.
And to your point about the different timelines, I think that's probably why Rogers has focused so much on like Winfrey too, with the bottom of the receiver unit sort of guy, looking at him, because if Amari Toure has a higher ceiling, which I think it's fair to say he possibly does, that might be 2 to 3 years from now. Rogers isn't going to probably be here to care about that.
True.
Who can help him right now? That's Juwan Winfrey.
Well, it's all special teams too. And that's the reason why I had Toure on my projected 53, because he's got the speed for special teams, and he's a solid physical receiver. I've been impressed with his physicality. So that can help you on special teams now. But as a receiver, you're absolutely right. By the time Amari Toure is ready, Aaron Rodgers might not be throwing him the ball.
Yeah, and let's look at it for this year. Lazard, Cobb, Watkins,
Watson,
Dobbs. Oh, yeah,
Dobbs,
and Watson. Yeah,
Watson.
So that's 5 guys. 5 guys aren't going to play. I mean, until one of them gets hurt, or one jumps the other. If Watson jumps, a couple of guys.
Rogers.
Yeah.
Amari
Amari Rogers, who had a very good game. I thought that was the first time they used him like the player he was at Clemson, and it paid off. He looked pretty good.
And we saw that in practice during the week. And not to switch gears, Kassidy, but I think that I think the running back situation is very fascinating as well, with Tyler Goodson having the game he did. But we saw Amari Rogers start to get some practice reps in the backfield as a running back, Ty Montgomery flashbacks. And I just don't know that they're going to keep 2 running backs or 3 running backs on this 53. Now, practice squad elevations can help with that, but also having an emergency guy like Amari Rogers who can take snaps in the backfield as a running back can help with that too. It almost seemed like they were kind of gearing toward that role a little bit, where they might be a little light in the backfield, but hey, they've got a guy in Amari Rogers that can do both, including being a running back some.
Yeah, and I mean, let's face it. If they lose Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, they're not going to the Super Bowl. Tyler Goodson isn't going to lead them to the Super Bowl. Now, you could say, well, what about James Starks? Yeah. James Starks came out of absolutely nowhere and became the postseason hero. But I still, Goodson has flaws, and I think they're fine cutting him and Patrick Taylor and signing them to the practice squad. I don't think that'll be a problem either, and I think you're right. Amari Rogers is the third running back.
And that's an emergency. That's an emergency back. But if they lose Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, no matter who comes in, whether you play pure running back or not, they're in an emergency. So that's what that's for.
And the other thing is, think back a year ago when we saw Kylan Hill. Kylan Hill was in a different gear than Tyler Goodson. I mean, he was, the minute you saw him, you were like, what the heck? Why did he last so long in the draft? There was some reason. But, boy, he was explosive, more so than Tyler Goodson.
I wonder if Kylan Hill changes that three running back thing. That's the unknown that we just –
I mean, right now he's still on PUP.
Yeah, and they have a month.
What we don't know is how he comes back from ACL.
Right.
Is he still in that same gear?
Yeah.
And if he is, then he's probably the third running back. If he's not, they keep it with. It's a big wild card.
When Patrick Taylor was on the roster last year as the third running back, that was post Amari Rogers, or that was post Kylan Hill, right?
Yes.
That's why he was there.
Yeah, I think they can go 4 weeks, whatever it takes to get Kylan Hill ready. Amari Rogers is the third running back, and when Kylan Hill comes back, then they'll make a spot for him because he might be their kickoff guy too.
And the thing you said about the receiver, and every team has their own Juwan Winfreys and Samari Torres. It's the same at running back. I mean, every team's got their running back that they feel good about, they want to keep. So
running
Tyler Goodson getting through the waiver, there's a real good chance of that happening, and then he's your third running back as a practice squad elevation guy.
I'm going to argue your point there, that running backs are a dime a dozen. I think in this league, with the way football has been going the past 5-10 years, 7-on-7 becoming more of an emphasis and how much running backs get beat up, especially coming out of college, I would say receivers are a dime a dozen, not a running back. Y'all both look like you're contemplating.
I am.
I would say there are more receiver options than there used to be, but there's not as many great receivers. I think we're still limited by the number of great receivers. I think you can win with running backs who aren't great. I think in the NFL you can win with guys who are just okay.
I think it depends on who's the receiver and who's the running back because, and this is probably true of most positions, right? But your average NFL starter at either position, he's going to make some contributions sometimes but not be a difference maker. But there's difference makers running backs. We saw that in Aaron Jones, right? There's difference makers at receiver, Devonte Adams. Those guys are not a dime a dozen. Like those guys are superstars and they tilt the field. But the run-of-the-mill average NFL starter at most positions, including those two, you can find those guys.
You could find, they drafted Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams, 4th and 5th round? Mm-hmm. So to me, that's a dime. That they didn't expend a ton of draft capital on 2 running backs who are almost, well, one of them's a starter for sure, and the other is, part-time starter.
From a draft standpoint, it's easier to find running backs day 3 than receivers. But neither is a position where if you really look at that the production by round that you really need to go in the first round for, because receivers, it's earlier than day 3, but that's second day for receivers, second, third round receivers. That's the sweet spot at receiver. Whereas, yes, I do think that from a number standpoint, you can find more productive running backs later in the draft than receiver.
2 years ago, when I was covering the Jags, they cut Leonard Fournette to keep an undrafted free agent. And at the time, we were like, what the heck are they doing? And then that undrafted free agent became James Robinson, who, led rookies in his rookie year. So I guess it's just, evaluating the talent you have.
Yeah, and it's money, it's cap, it's the shelf life of running backs is not very long. It's, 2 or 3 years, really. I mean, you look at Todd Gurley was on top of the world, I mean, he was unstoppable running back, and within a year he's...
Is he even on a team right now?
I don't think so.
I don't think he is. That would be interesting to know.
It's just... that's why those guys got to make all the money they can as fast as they can.
That's not a question that is without a local angle too, because Aaron Jones is on top of the world right now. There are not a lot of guys in this league that can do what he does, and I don't just mean as a runner, but as a receiver and literally line up all over the formation. Not a lot of running backs do that, but it is a very quick shelf life. So, the Packers have to be wondering, But as far as this season, I think you feel good with just the two and kind of patching together your third running back situation.
Because of that shelf life and because of the Packers' current receiver situation, it almost works in Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon's favor that they're probably going to be used 50-50 this year as a running back and a pass-catching option. And so with that being said, let's wrap up this third running back discussion with cuts coming. Spoon, I know you've looked into this, and Ryan, you as well. Do they value in that third running back someone who can be an additional pass-catching option, someone who's a better pass blocker, or someone who can just contribute on special teams?
Well, I think we're talking about Amari Rogers here. That's what we're talking about, and he does both those things. And when Kassidy Hill comes back, assuming he's physically ready, he'll be in that group as well. And that's what it is. And like LaFleur said, you got to play special teams if you're going to be the number 3 running back. Well, Amari Rogers, if he's the number 3, is their top returner. And Kassidy Hill would be a returner if he were.
That's a good point because Rogers can play receiver or back.
I really think it's special teams, pass pro, what you can do with the ball in that order.
Well, we've kind of hammered the offense there. Let's switch to the defensive side. We've seen a few more cuts in the secondary just because of injuries last week. Is that somewhere where you think that they cut a few more and then bring a veteran in, or who do they have right now with Darnell Savage probably coming back, Adrian Amos, Sean Davis? I'm trying to think of who else is in there. Dallin Levitt will be coming back. Which way do you think they go with the safety unit, Ryan?
I had them keeping 4. It's a real shame for Ennis Gaines because I think that his versatility when healthy and his special teams aptitude might have had a place on this roster, but having the second hamstring, I spoke with him today in the locker room. He said that it's very minor, but that's rare if it is, because usually you have a second hamstring pull right after the first and it's worse, and that's usually how it goes. So maybe he dodged one there, but I think that it's a shame for him and for the Packers that he was not able to get a full camp, because he's a guy that can line up in the slot, which, hey, they need some depth there. He's a guy that played corner and then moved to safety when he got here and then picked up safety okay. But yeah, it's going to be special teams in the secondary behind the first 5.
That reminds me, let me throw this in there real quick. I was talking to Eric Stokes today in the locker room, and Jerry came in, Jerry Gray, OG, isn't that what they call him? And he told Rasul, he said, I'm trying to remember exactly what he said, something about you're moving to money, so-and-so's moving up. And Rasul went down to the safeties to relay the message. And I was in the middle of talking to Stokes, so I didn't catch it all. But I could tell Stokes kind of looking, and I looked at him and I said, did he just change y'all's lineup? And he said, I think he did. And so who knows what sort of decisions they're making, but they do have to make some of these hard decisions in the next couple of days. Safety unit, go.
I was going to, you mentioned Guinness about it, Ennis Gaines about it.
You just gave him
you know
cool
what's on my mind.
0:00.
You were saying it's a shame. It's actually probably to the benefit for the Packers that he didn't play, and they can cut him and probably get him back right away because there's not a lot of scouting on him. And I think he is a good player. Remember, he's a guy who missed his whole senior year. I forgot what the injury was, a foot or something like that, and really hasn't played much. And you're right, he's a slot guy. He's not really a safety. He came into the league as a slot guy, and you can't have too many of those guys. He's big, and he plays good special teams. So I think the fact that they got Savage back today and they got Levitt back, that's pretty big. So I think they're pretty secure there if they keep 4.
They just got to keep those 5 guys healthy. When I say the 5, the secondary, the 3 corners, the 2 safeties, they got to keep them healthy, because what you've seen all preseason is that if there's a weak link, if there's one injury, the depth falls off pretty quick.
I will say I've been kind of impressed with Shamar Jean-Charles. Like he's improved quite a bit. Last year he was not ready to play in the slot. And I watched him, and he played outside against Kansas City and played pretty well. And Keyshawn Nixon can play the slot, too. He's not bad.
They actually lined Keyshawn Nixon up in the slot a couple of times last week at practice.
Aaron Rodgers was talking
the slot. That's almost predominantly. Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers was talking this past time at his locker, and I talked to him about the defense, and he said that when you can cover this way, you're really solid. And he made a point to mention that he really likes their top 3 corners, but he's like, there's a 4th and a 5th. He wouldn't say names, but a 4th and a 5th who have really developed, he thinks, into solid NFL corners. And after the gaggle walked away, I go up to him real quick because he didn't say a name. And I said 4th and 5th are Shamar and Nixon. And he's like, maybe. But so he wouldn't confirm it. But I think that's who he meant, because you're right. Those 2 have looked pretty good. With that said, the secondary as a whole, the depth there, there's a lot of long touchdowns this preseason.
Ennis Gaines was sidelined with injury his junior and senior season of at TCU.
Yeah, I knew he had been out for a long time.
Didn't he get injured when he first got here too, because he was working for DoorDash. Yeah, I remember that. You almost just have to wonder if he's just injury prone, if he's one of those guys that can't stay healthy.
Could be.
Yeah, hate it for him. Let's move up to the defensive line. As deep as it's been in a long time, that makes cuts even harder. How many would you safely say they could keep there to keep that depth? Yeah, to keep that depth.
Wait, could keep or will keep? Those are 2
Answer
different
both.
things.
Answer both. Let's start with could keep.
Well, I don't think there's a lot of question there, is there? I mean, you didn't really. The only question mark to me was Chris Slayton.
I think that's an interesting debate, though, between Heflin and Slayton. And I think Slayton is a guy who's probably going to be on the practice squad, but a guy that, just kind of like Jack Heflin last year, he's made plays. There's something there. He's very different than Jack Heflin, too, because Jack Heflin, what do they call him? The trash can full of dirt. Why? Because he's tough to move in the run game, but he doesn't have the quick twitch. Chris Slayton is the opposite of that. He is, the way I talked to him in the locker room today, he ran a 5.1 flat 40, which, he wasn't happy with it, and I would have thought he was a sub-5 guy with the way that he's getting off the line of scrimmage. I mean, I was like, wow, I would have thought it would be better than that, because his get off is there's twitch there, and so he's ahead his game in pass rush than run defense, which is the opposite of Jack Heflin. I think that's an interesting decision. I had Heflin on my 53 because he's had a good camp. He's had another, just like last year, he's had another good camp. But if you keep Heflin and Slayton, you're looking at 7 defensive linemen. You can make a case for 7 defensive linemen, but there's no way they're keeping 7 defensive linemen as a number. So I think that's 6 defense. I think they keep 6. They keep one of Heflin or Slayton, the others to the practice squad. And I guess I flipped my coin and it came up Heflin, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if it came up Slayton.
Yeah, I'd go with Heflin too. I think people with size and a little bit of mobility and show up every single game or preseason he shows up, and so that tells you something. So I think it's 6. I don't really. We're talking about them playing Clark, Jaron Reed, Dean Lowry. Those 3 are going to rotate amongst they play so much nickel amongst the 2. And then when they go base, it'll be those 3, and then Slayton will get mixed in there. Devonte Wyatt, I think that's going to be a slow process. He's really finding out about the pro game. That one, he needs to get a lot stronger, and two, he's got to do more than just try to be an athlete. He's got to be a player.
That happened for Kenny Clark too.
Yeah, it happens to all of them. They dominate so badly in college, against these slow-footed offensive linemen they might face. And then they get to the NFL, and it's a whole different ballgame.
Kenny Clark didn't do much until the end of his rookie year, and you started to see it. There was a game in Dallas, I think it was, where I don't know if that was his first sack off the top of my head, but you saw some pass rush, and it was late. Going back to the Heflin and Slayton, it comes down to what they feel like they need more. And what's interesting about that is Kenny Clark's the interior pass rusher, right? Well, they've got a guy in Devonte Wyatt who's a first-round pick that is also the interior pass rusher that they want. With that said, Kenny Clark is their interior anchor in the run defense, and they've got a guy in TJ Slayton who's kind of that same interior anchor in the run defense. So they go too deep in both of those. We're talking 3 deep now with Heflin and Slayton, and I what do you need more? I don't know which one they really need more. It's pretty close when it comes to that.
Which one plays more on special teams?
Well, Heflin plays, I think, on field goal unit, but that's about it. Yeah, I think they have the interior speed guys, and plus they have the ability to move Gary inside, which they've shown, and Preston Smith inside, and they need to stop the run. That's going to be a big deal this year, and so that's why I'm leaning towards him.
I am too. I put him on my 53.
Let's move to special teams, guys. I know there's still a lot of question with Mason Crosby and whether or not he will be ready for week 1. Are the questions the answer?
I don't think we know. Be quite frank, I'm not sure they know yet.
That's what I mean by is the fact that there's still questions sort of your answer.
I'm like, okay, as we record this, we're 2 days away before they have to make this decision. Less than 48 hours, and he hasn't been activated. Now, we were discussing earlier, why might that be? Okay, well, maybe they don't want to let other teams know what they're going to do with Ramiz Ahmad, who has had a phenomenal training camp. I mean, came in late. He's a USFL guy. He's hit everything. His kickoffs have been decent. I think they had the option, if they're not sure about Crosby, to just wait and go with Ahmad. Now, it's a little bit of a risk. He hasn't kicked in an NFL game under pressure with, 70,000 or 60,000 and that stupid horn going off all the time, that could be huge, and he might kick it, like Burkic did, that hook shot. So I don't know, but Crosby will be their kicker at some point this year. The just question is he, do they feel good enough for him to be the starter? And I think they're going to wait till the very last minute to let everybody know.
The huge difference between those two is the institutional knowledge of Lambeau Field. It's not even, I don't even think it's the crowd and noise, and it's kicking in this Rubik's Cube of a stadium with all the different, with the cold, but the wind patterns. The wind patterns are crazy in this stadium.
Because it bounces, right?
Yeah. So basically, if you're standing at field level in Lambeau Field, there's 2 American flags on, the south or north end zone. I can't remember off the top of my head.
On the north end.
My internal compass is off. So on the north end zone, there's 2 American flags, and they're blowing in over the stadium. The wind's bouncing off the stands, the bowl, and you're actually, if your back is to the flags and it's blowing in over the stadium, you're actually kicking into the wind because it's bouncing right back at you.
Yeah, you have to look at the flags on the goalposts too.
And those are usually swirling. Mason Crosby knows how to get through all that. You were making the point, Spoon, why the fact that they hadn't activated him yet might also not be a tell either, because they're going to want Ahmed.
Yes, they're going to want him back on the practice squad if they're going to activate him.
And so if they release him, or if they activate Mason Crosby now, it's a neon sign to the rest of the league that, hey, this guy's coming open. Get your film study in. Whereas if you wait until the last minute with Mason Crosby, you're not tipping your hand. You're not. It's not a tell.
Yeah, some team might say, look, we don't know for sure if they're going to go with Ahmad, so we'll trade for a kicker somewhere else. They'll go and get a kicker, and then, that way the Packers will be like, have kind of waited it out, and so that team is out of the picture because they went and traded for a kicker. So I don't know. That's a scenario that they may be looking at. But I think Crosby was pretty confident that he was going to be ready to kick. I don't think we're going to know. We'll know on Tuesday. Once we'll know then, and then we'll see.
I don't think we know about Crosby. I think the only one that we know about is Pat O'Donnell, because I don't think we know about long snapper either. I talked with Jack Coco in the locker room today, and it kind of was very transparent about that moment that they cut Stephen Wordle. He didn't even know it. Someone told him, and then it was just like, that's. I mean, I'm the only one left. Like it's my job to go win now, and that revelation to him. But there's also, he's not the only one left because it's every other long snapper that's on the market that they can just bring in. So he's still got to compete.
And they have brought in a few to try out.
They have.
A lot, yeah.
And so I don't know if we know what's going to happen there.
Which tells me they're still looking.
Yeah. I would say they're constantly looking. But I would also say that we haven't seen any glaring mistakes from him in the games. He's been pretty solid in the games. So do you just... You've got your operation, as they like to call it. Do you just keep going with that, and then see if he fails in the game?
One of the things he said is that with Bisaccia, the special teams drills are so chaotic. He said that was the word he used, chaotic, in terms of the pressure and doing it one after another rapid fires, that when you get into the games, it's just one. And it's a lot easier to focus and on that one, your footwork, your hands, everything, because you've been doing it rapid fire. That's something that he's felt was helpful when it comes to the games.
I thought it was interesting with Coco. He didn't really snap punts in college, and he's handled that fine so far. There hasn't been.
He was a 3-year
bad
offensive
snaps.
lineman.
Hasn't been any low snaps, anything like that, and so he has been fine. But as we said, they are still looking. Going back to Ahmad and the institutional knowledge that Crosby has. When he first got here, I remember talking to him about that. And he's like, I've never kicked in the cold. And he said, and Mason has told me that the wind is weird in Lambeau. They don't get to kick on this field until it's game time. So it's not like he can go out there and practice. I guess he had the preseason game versus the Saints.
I don't know. Like Crosby during the week of a season goes and kicks in Lambeau on Friday. Okay. But I don't know if they've allowed them to do that here. I mean, why wouldn't you? Let them go out. They treat the
They're
grass
very protective of their
grass.
grass.
Yes, exactly. Like it's, pristine but so I don't know if he's gotten a chance to do that, but he did kick, in a preseason game.
And the wind is really a bigger issue than the cold, because the wind is all year. The wind is September. You remember that, I forget what year it was, Spoon, but that Packers-Vikings game where nobody could make a field goal early, and that was a September game a couple seasons ago, and they both sides. I mean, and they were just looking at the goalpost like in defeat, like what is going on here with this wind? That's week 1 through January, and the cold obviously then compounds that late November into December. But that wind is insane.
And it's not just here. I mean, remember the Cincinnati game last year?
Yep.
I mean, that was just insane. And
anywhere on the water. Anywhere on the water is going to be
two of the best kickers in the game, and he couldn't hit for anything.
They missed 5 between them, right?
Yeah.
I'll never forget that game. That game was nuts.
And then they couldn't miss towards the end of the game. Kept sending it into extra. Where was I going next with this? Oh, the special team still. I did have a funny story about the grass, though. You were talking about how protective they are of their grass. So last week I was out there just scouting stuff for a video, and some of the field guys were out there. And, they have all these different machines. So I was asking them what they do. It was funny because I just had a conversation with someone about why teams will go with turf, that it's cheaper even though it's not as safe for guys, as we discussed with the Packers bringing their guys back possibly in Minnesota on turf. And then you look at a field like I think Chicago had just had their preseason game, and that's grass, but there were divots all over the field.
Oh, that's a notoriously bad.
Yes, it is.
And I've heard that Lambeau used to be notoriously bad, and then they put a lot of work into it over the past 10 years. They've got like those miles and miles of tubing underneath it. Anyways, they were pulling the machines off the field. So I was like, what did they do? Because they all look the same. And he goes, well, this one measures the temperature in the sun, this one measures the temperature in the shade, and this one measures the temperature a foot underground, because they have to all be consistently the same. So we need to water and or shade different parts of the grass differently depending on what temperature they are at the time.
Yeah, and players, because of the shadows and stuff, players complain about the field being slippery because certain parts are, there's dew and then certain parts dry up and certain parts don't. But they put so much into that. You guys are way too young for this, but in the, I think it was the 96 NFC Championship game, they replaced the whole middle of the field the week of the game. It's grass. And they had just played the 49ers in the rain, and it was just torn up. But that's what they used to do. They just replaced the whole thing. And George Toma, the genius groundskeeper from Kansas City, came in, and he was in charge of it, and off they went. It was terrible. It was awful, but, that's what they did. So, this stuff is so high tech. It's just ridiculous.
It is. You said you had another point about special teams you wanted to make?
So we were talking about it, and I think one of the things that bodes well, I guess, for them or not as badly as it seemed. So I was looking at it, and some of the guys who are going to be playing on special teams are starters. I mean, Eric Stokes is going to be on special teams. Darnell Savage might be on special teams. Rasul Douglas will be on special teams. Josiah DeGuara is going to be on special teams. There's a lot of guys. They could bring in Adrian Amos, could play special teams. I think we're going to see, until they get this thing in order, I think we're going to see some starters playing special teams.
One thing that we missed when talking about the offense earlier was the offensive line. Let's jump back to that. Matt LaFleur was very vague today about Elton Jenkins. And Spoon, you pushed him, and he became even more vague. And didn't really want to say what might be going on with him, might not. Any concern there? I mean, this line is still, at least in parts of it, seems to be set, but also in flux. Does that make sense?
Well, the difficult part about it is they don't have to do an injury report till next week. Mm-hmm. So right now they don't have to say anything about it. We saw him riding the bike. Who knows? Was it an elbow injury? Is it I don't know. It could have been anything. Could have been a head thing, maybe banged heads or something. Maybe he had COVID, for all we know. They don't tell us that either. So, maybe for 5 days, maybe this is his day back. I wouldn't go with any of those. I have no idea. But the fact he was there, at least, and riding the bike is usually a good sign that the guy's not, laid up with a cast or something like that.
What we know is that it's not a personal reason because he was there.
Yeah. And it's not a knee. We were told it's not a knee injury, not part of the knee injury.
Yeah, because the way that Matt LaFleur said it was that it was not necessarily planned, but we're going to keep it internal. So that, to me, opened the possibility. But he was there. He wasn't absent. So it's not a personal thing. You're right, Spoon. The Packers emphasized that this had nothing to do with the knee.
Maybe he went to join Tom Brady on The Masked Singer and just got cut really quick.
Maybe. I don't know.
It could be a possibility.
I love keep the conspiracy theories coming.
Here's a conspiracy theory. They put him out because they don't want the Vikings to know that he's going to be starting at right tackle.
Hey, there was a fighter jet Tuesday that was flying, and I can't confirm or deny it was purple, and it had a skull written on the side of it, but
That thing was loud too, and it flew it flew low over the practice field. I mean, we could have seen what color socks the pilot was wearing if we really looked. It was low.
It's almost like that thing broke the sound barrier.
It did break the sound barrier.
Yeah, that was insane.
It was insane because you saw it and then you heard it, and that's, I don't know a lot about science, but that seems to me like it broke the sound barrier.
Good thing I'm deaf that I couldn't hear it.
It was a little uncomfortable. It was loud when you heard it too.
No, what day was this?
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
I think it was Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Yeah.
I've been out at every practice.
Maybe you were running a couple minutes.
Or maybe I was late, yeah.
You would have remembered it if you heard it. Speaking of breaking sound barriers, that might be the fans' reaction when David Bakhtiari finally does come back. You like that transition?
There you go. Well done.
We don't know any more about him today than we did last week either, safe to say?
Except that he practiced.
And
that's a positive sign because he didn't, and it might indicate that they're actually telling the truth that it was a rest day.
That's why it's positive, because they said when he missed Tuesday's practice, they said this is part of the planned ramp-up recovery timetable. No alarms here, which is the exact same sentence that they said last November when he was activated on PUP. The difference being we didn't see him come back. Like he missed it and then he had surgery. And so for him to be back in pads today, that's a positive thing.
When he lines up at left tackle in a stadium that's full of people, then we'll know he's back. Yes. Until then, we don't know.
And that's when the sound barrier will be broken.
Yes.
Especially if it's like
probably
here,
with that horn.
Here versus Chicago Sunday night. That horn, you're going to make some Vikings fans mad. That's the second time now.
I know. I will say it's not that I'm anti-Vikings. I loved the Metrodome. You know, that thing was a great place to watch a game. But that thing just kind of hurts my ears.
Well, it's one of the few stadiums in the league that's an open-air press box too. So they don't just play the horn. You get all the horn. That we're not used to that noise.
To go back to all my, I'm always going retro on you guys. I'll never forget there was a practice where the Packers actually had Steve McMichael, the former Bear, for a year, and they were playing the Vikings that week, and he took one of those red cones and he started blowing on it during practice. It was really funny. I thought that was hilarious.
We should ask LaFleur if he plans on like replicating that horn in practice for the rookies next week.
Yeah, they should.
They should. That's a great. As y'all know, I spent a lot of time in Florida. They play Utah next week for their opener, and Utah has been purposely practicing inside and cranking up the heat to try to replicate the humidity.
It's a good idea. Good luck with that.
And I'm like, you can't replicate it.
You can't replicate Florida and Utah.
No, you can, and not at all. Will be interesting. With that in mind, a lot of the guys I know are going to get to go home this weekend over Labor Day weekend, take in some of their alma maters on their opening weekends. But that will be after the cuts. We will have practice on, like I said, Monday. They're off on Tuesday. They make their cuts. They come back and practice on Wednesday. And then they're off Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So a good long Labor Day weekend.
Be sure we promote the live blog on Cut Day. During the blog, I mentioned we weren't sure because we didn't know when the Packers are going to make their cuts, but they're going to make their cuts on Tuesday. So I'll be there all day, and Ryan and Kassidy will be filling me with information and feeding me information, and we'll have as many of the cuts as we can get to.
Fastest typer in the business right here. You literally see the smoke coming off the keyboard.
Thankfully, on cut day, it's not about speed.
It's about accuracy.
It's a long, long day. So
it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, as Spoon said, stay tuned to his live blog and stay tuned to PackersNews.com for full coverage as they ramp up towards cut day and then signing back their 16 practice squad players, which will be really interesting to kind of see who lands there as well. That's a significantly large practice squad.
Yeah, it is.
It
really is.
Yeah, to know that you've got that and you can have 16 to possibly bring back. Guys, any final thoughts? Your final 60 seconds?
It's kind of nice to know that we're at the finish line of camp, and nice to know that we have a weekend where we don't have to be up here as well. But I'm ready for real football. I've once the cuts are made, then we'll know a little bit more, and then it'll all be talking about Packers-Vikings, and I'm kind of ready to go there.
You're ready for real football. You didn't watch Nebraska-Northwestern yesterday?
I didn't. I did watch on Twitter.
Great game.
Yeah, I did see the absolute demolition of poor Scott Frost.
He kicked an onside kick up 11 in the third quarter. That was a choice.
Not good.
That was a choice. Sorry, we got off track. Ryan, your final thought?
Cassidy, I told you that any time from here until October that you give me this platform, we're going to be talking about the Mets. But I can actually spin this and localize this a little bit. So the Mets had their first Old Timers Day. They're 60 years old this season, formed in 1962, since 1994, and it was amazing from a fan perspective. And you might know the answer to this, Spoon. I don't know. I don't mean to get on a tangent here. The Packers ever done like an Old Timers Day type event? Because it was really, really cool from a fan's perspective.
Well, they do Alumni Day every opening day at Lambeau Field, but it's not like everybody comes. I think for the 75th anniversary, they did a huge reunion. But, the significance of the Mets is there's probably still guys alive from the beginning of the Mets. Well, no, I suppose not. 60 years.
Well, there was a few that the first winning pitcher in Mets history was there. But, the cool part about it, and it's different because baseball and football are not the same sport, obviously, especially when you get to a certain age. But I mean, it was, they played a game. They played like 3 innings. So you saw Doc Gooden pitch to Mike Piazza. It was amazing to see.
I used to love those old timers.
Yes, it was incredible.
Back in the day, the Brewers would do that too. That was fun.
And so I'm thinking the Packers ought to do something where they get and who knows if Brett Favre would come back, but Brett Favre is throwing to a receiver of a different generation in flag football. It's not tackle. We're not trying to kill anyone here, right?
There would be a lot of plastic, a lot of knees,
Yes, but nice and light flag football. I'm not talking about, strap the pads on or anything. But that'd be a cool event for the Packers.
You could probably convince Brett Favre to do it and just call it a Copperfit commercial, because doesn't he play football in all those commercials?
Yeah, he'd have to be paid to come in. Was Nolan Ryan there?
He was not.
Oh,
I know.
Jerry Kuzman, is he still alive?
He was not there.
Cleon Jones?
Cleon Jones was there. Yeah, that was cool.
I'm trying to think of Mets. This is from my old Stratomatic days when I used to know all the
Ed Kranepool was there. Ron Swoboda was there.
Oh, yeah, those are names. I'm trying to think of their big pitching staff. They had 4 awesome starters.
Seaver, Kuzman.
Oh, yeah, Seaver, of course.
Yeah,
Kuzman,
of course.
Ryan. Anyway. Okay, that's it.
So every time you tell me 60 seconds, Cassidy, it's going to be a Let's Go Mets moment.
We spun it. That works. I mean, and they're not going to play a game, but there will probably be a decent reunion when they put Leroy up in the ring, right?
Yeah, there'll probably be a number of guys who come, but it'll be interesting. Alumni Day, they'll have quite a few.
Back to seeing old timer in baseball. I was at this game when I was in high school. I was a special guest. We were on the field. It was a USA versus Japan, friendly baseball game. And Ozzie Smith was there because he's from Mobile. And, he's still running around. And people wanted him to do the backflip like he used to do at shortstop. And he's like, I can't do that. But he's still, running around, having fun. Well, then Hank Aaron threw out the first pitch because he's also from Mobile. And so you got Ozzie Smith out there running around on the field with all the fans. And then Hank Aaron, a car comes through the third gate fence line, pulls behind home plate. He gets out of the back of the car, walks to the pitcher's mound, throws the first pitch, gets back in the car, and the car drives him out the first base side.
Good for Hank. Yep. Good. That's exactly what he deserves.
Exactly. That's the treatment he should get.
Yep.
And it was right after his record was broken. And so it was almost like a bittersweet
his
moment.
record was broken.
Right.
Asterisk.
Do you attribute to the fact that it wasn't real since it was
while
he was on steroids?
I don't recognize it. No.
See,
Aaron is the home run king.
I feel different because the numbers are the numbers, and it's part of the tainted history of baseball. And it is. You're right. Math is math, but there is an asterisk there too. It contextualizes. Yeah, this is 756.
So if you're a voter, do you put McGuire and Sosa in the Hall?
I do. I think the Hall of Fame is a museum telling the history of.
I haven't spent enough time thinking about it. On the surface, no, but Yeah,
What about
baseball, like,
Pete
don't
Rose?
put me in the baseball thing, because those guys, they have all their, rites and rituals, and they think way deeper than I do, baseball guys. So I can't really tell you. I just know that I think Hank Aaron was a legitimate, everything he went through, and then to have some steroid guys break his record is just, to me, just disgraceful.
I got a soft spot for Hank, obviously, not only just loving baseball, but being from Mobile.
Plus, I saw him hit a home run, too.
Really?
Yeah.
When he was with
the
Milwaukee Brewers? Or
Yeah,
Milwaukee
yeah.
Braves?
Well, no, this is Brewers. I'm not that old. He came back from the Atlanta Braves and played his last 2 years with the Milwaukee Brewers.
Okay.
See, I'd probably like Hank Aaron more if he wasn't an Atlanta Brave. No, I'm just kidding.
Not his fault. He was a Milwaukee Brave.
Don't yell at me.
He was a Milwaukee Brave, and they got moved to Atlanta thanks to Coca-Cola.
Hank Aaron's great.
That was one of the worst things that ever happened in Milwaukee. Anyway.
Being from Mobile, we have a ton of big name baseball players that came out of there. Hank Aaron, Ozzie Smith, Satchel Paige, Jake Peavy, who has won a couple of World Series. So yeah, it's big baseball town. Fun.
Page, my mom saw Satchel Paige pitch.
Really, that's an old timer name for you right there, Satchel Paige. Anyways, well, we've spent a good 10 minutes talking about baseball now. So
I tend to do that.
90% of the people have turned us off.
It's not going to get better until the Mets lose in October. And yes, they'll lose in October. But until then, it's not going to get better.
Doesn't Wild Card Weekend start in September?
No.
It doesn't?
Nope.
I really
October
thought it did.
11th or something like that is when the playoffs start.
Okay. Anyways,
Mr. November, they're going to start calling guys.
I know that it is too late. For all your Packers coverage, stay tuned to PackersNews.com. As I said, we will cut down to 53 on Tuesday, and then we'll really see kind of how this roster shapes up, and then get ready for Minnesota. I'm going to bring in a horn for our next podcast, Spoon,
Okay.
and blow it on you, get you ready.
I'll turn my hearing aid down.
For Tom and Ryan, I'm Kassidy. This has been the Green 19 podcast from JS Online and PackersNews.com.